This story is about decisions that change the lives of the main characters, leaving lasting effects. Dive into this gripping tale with unexpected twists and deep emotions. Frank Walker sat alone at a restaurant table, watching people enjoy their meals, take walks, and make phone calls. Despite the festive atmosphere, Frank was lost in thought about a surprising message left by a server. The note warned him about Marc Lavalliere, who might be trying to charm Frank's wife. Frank was shocked and worried when he saw his wife dancing with Lavalliere again. They disappeared from sight, and Frank decided to act. Before he could get up, the music stopped, and he saw them leave the dance floor. He relaxed, thinking Lavalliere would bring his wife back. Instead, they went to Lalalia's table and talked with his friends. After a while, Lavalliere left, and Frank's wife, after saying she loved him, headed to the restroom. Frank felt something was off about her declaration of love. Frank stood to follow her but was blocked by Lavaliere's associates, as the note had warned. Frank's job involved fixing problems for companies, dealing with difficult and corrupt leaders. He often faced threats and bullying but was used to handling such people. Frank intimidated Lavaliere's associates, making them move aside. He hurried after his wife and caught up with her near the back exit. He called out to her, "Brooke." She ignored him, so he called again, "Brooke, where are you going?" She stopped, turned, and asked why he was there. Frank noticed her behavior was distant and annoyed that he had followed her. "I should ask you the same thing. What are you doing here?" he asked. Brooke thought for a moment before answering, but then hesitated and stopped mid-sentence. Frank looked into her eyes and asked again, "Where are you going, Brooke?" Brooke looked away, thinking that this situation shouldn't have happened. Frank shouldn't be here. She started to speak but stopped to think about what to say. She knew lying was useless and decided to tell him the truth, even though it would be uncomfortable for her and hurt Frank. Earlier that evening, Brooke had run into Marc Lavalliere by accident. After leaving the restroom, she passed by his table. He saw her, got up, stopped her, introduced himself, and started a brief conversation. She then returned to her table with Frank and the others. As the party was in full swing, the band began playing their first song. Soon after, Marc approached their table. Everyone was excited to see the local soccer player and sports hero. He was friendly, shook hands with everyone, took selfies, signed autographs, and then asked Brooke to dance. She was surprised and said no, but he politely insisted. The others encouraged her, and Frank didn't object, so she reluctantly agreed. Brooke was nervous but captivated by the experience. She sat with Frank and the guests, thinking about Marc's invitation. She felt torn about leaving Frank to go with someone she barely knew. But the thought of being with Marc excited her. She realized wanting him was different from her usual loyalty to Frank. She had found other men attractive before, but it had never gone beyond that. This night was different. She wanted Marc's attention and to give in to the moment, despite feeling guilty about betraying Frank. Brooke tried to find a justification she could accept morally and hoped Frank would understand. She decided to leave with Marc because he was not just an athlete and local star, but also had a charm and honor that fascinated her. Marc seemed like a romantic dream, and his offer was too tempting. She believed Frank might see it as a unique adventure for her and would support her decision just this once. She thought he might be disappointed but would understand because he was not just her husband but also her best friend. These thoughts comforted her, giving her a reason she could live with and hoped Frank could accept. Deep down, she knew she was driven by Marc's bold approach, awakening a desire she couldn't deny. She decided not to miss out on this thrilling adventure, reminding herself that she had her own needs and desires beyond being Frank's partner. As the birthday dinner ended and the group moved back to the venue for more celebration, Marc invited Brooke to dance again. Frank, clearly annoyed, resisted Marc's persistent requests. Brooke skillfully navigated her husband's objections, agreeing to one final dance because she liked the song. Marc thanked Frank for his patience and led Brooke to a dark corner of the dance floor. There, he asked if she was ready to leave. She laughed and said yes, admitting she was giving in to him completely. As the dance ended, Marc led Brooke back to their table to discuss their departure. He reassured her about her safety and promised to address any concerns Frank might have. Trusting him, Brooke moved to the back exit, ready to leave with Marc. But their plan was interrupted when Frank unexpectedly appeared at the door, revealing a flaw in Marc's plan. He blocked her exit, demanding an explanation. "Brooke, I'm waiting. Tell me where you're going," Frank demanded. Brooke gathered all her courage and replied, "Frank, I'm going with Marc." "Are you going with Marc?" Frank asked, his voice emotionless. "Yes, I'm joining Marc. He invited me to his place," she stated. Frank remained calm, asking why she was going to his house and avoiding the front door. "Frank, this is too complicated to explain right now. I'll call or text you later to explain, but for now, I must go. Marc is waiting," she explained. Frank, still calm, refused to let her pass and insisted on understanding her intentions immediately. "Oh God. Frank, please, let's not make a scene. Just let me go and I'll explain everything later," Brooke pleaded. "No, Brooke, I need you to explain to me what's happening right now," Frank insisted, raising his voice. Faced with Frank's persistence, Brooke became defensive, retorting, "Frank, you don't control me. Move aside and let me go." "No, Brooke, you are my wife and you're not leaving until you explain your actions," Frank countered. Realizing Frank's determination, Brooke knew she needed to reveal her intentions. With a nervous sigh, she began, "Frank, I know this sounds awful, and I can't believe I'm doing this, but I'm going to Marc's to spend the night." She quickly added, "But, Frank, it's only for tonight and he'll bring me back tomorrow." Frank didn't immediately respond. It took him a few moments to process what his wife had just told him. Finally, he replied angrily, "No, Brooke, you will not spend the night with Marc. You're not going to a sleepover, are you? You're planning to be intimate with him, aren't you?" Frank interrupted. Brooke avoided his gaze, staying silent. "Tell me the truth, Brooke. Is that your plan?" Frank persisted, but Brooke remained silent, her eyes fixed on the ground. "Brooke, I know I'm right," he asserted. Brooke eventually replied, "Yes, Frank. You're right. I'm planning to be intimate with Marc," she admitted. There was silence in the hallway. Finally, Brooke looked up and saw the confused expression on her husband's face. "Frank, what are you thinking about?" Frank Walker was not easily surprised or shocked, but what his wife had just revealed deeply disturbed him. Even after reading the note that warned him this might happen, he lost his composure for a brief moment. "What am I thinking?" "I'll tell you what I'm thinking, Brooke. I think this is utterly astonishing. Just insane. That's what I'm thinking," he exclaimed. Brooke was startled by Frank's rare outburst. She had never seen him so angry, and it frightened her. "Oh, God. Frank, I'm sorry. It's just a fantasy about a romantic encounter with a celebrity or someone famous," Brooke said. Frank cut her off sarcastically. "Let me guess. Marc Lavalliere is your fairy tale prince or your knight in shining armor? Please, Frank, don't mock this. This is every woman's fantasy. Marc isn't just anyone. He's... I'll come back, and my dream will have come true. I will be happy, and you will be happy because you supported me in this and we will move on," she responded, hoping Frank believed her. But seeing his reaction, Brooke realized things weren't unfolding as she had hoped. "So you're discarding me to be intimate with your charming prince, who you see as far superior to me," he stated. "Damn, Brooke, that really hurts. Are you implying I'm not special? Not a real man?" he asked. No, Frank, you are special," she replied. "You are a real man," she exclaimed, distressed. Well, Brooke, then what did you mean? He asked. I'm not a professional athlete or a celebrity who supposedly knows how to please a woman sexually, is that it? Brooke looked down. There's more to it, she said. Then what's the issue? Are you bored with me? Frank asked. No, Frank. You're the best, she insisted. But still, you need someone else, he stated. Yes, she admitted, still avoiding his gaze. So tonight, you decided the person you desired is Marc Lavalliere, he said. She nodded, still looking away. So you've decided to spend the night with Marc, having a passionate night, he concluded. It's not about love. I don't have feelings of love for him. But yes, I've decided to share an intimate moment with him, something many women dream of, she said firmly. But she quickly added, Frank, I'm not abandoning our relationship. You're my husband, and I'll never walk away from what we have. But tonight, I won't be by your side. I'll be with Marc. I hope, no, I beg you to understand my desires and needs. Please, Frank, let's not make this a dramatic ordeal, she pleaded. Frank took a deep breath. Why, Brooke? Why do you believe I should be okay with you sleeping with another man and then returning to me as if it's nothing, he questioned. It's because you've always been open with me, and you've consistently respected my feelings, desires, and needs. I trust that when you see how important this night with Marc is to me, you'll manage your frustration and approach it calmly and maturely, she explained. Can I deal with it? Can I actually cope? Please explain how I'm supposed to come to terms with the fact that tonight you'll be in Marc Lavalliere's bed. How am I to face tomorrow when he brings you back, knowing you spent the entire night together? How can I look at you knowing you've been with someone else, he asked. Frank, I don't have an answer for you. I just hope you can figure this out and we can continue with our lives. I know you're upset with me, but can't you see how crucial this experience is for me, she questioned. Brooke, you're asking me to swallow my pride and accept your fling with Lavallieere, Frank remarked. This isn't a fling, she yelled. And no, Frank, I don't expect you to be okay with it. I'm asking you to understand my feelings and needs and to accept them because you love me. Because you're my best friend and soulmate. And you want me to have this unique experience, which I might never have again. Frank, this is my plea to you, dear, she said. Frank thought about Brooke's request. He struggled to understand how she could expect him to accept her being with Lavallieere. The more he thought about it, the clearer it became that she didn't understand the seriousness of her actions and their impact on him and their relationship. She seemed lost in a fantasy inspired by her interaction with Lavallieere. That evening, he felt compelled to snap her back to reality. Brooke, what do they call a man whose wife sleeps with another man? He asked. Brooke struggled with the term. Exactly, Brooke. They call him a cuckold, a man whose wife is involved with another man for pleasure. But I refuse to be made a cuckold by you and Marc Lavallieere, he said firmly. Tears filled Brooke's eyes as she faced Frank. So you're not going to stop me? She asked. No, Brooke, I won't interfere. You're an adult and capable of making your own choices. Whether you go through with this or not is up to you. If you believe this is what you need, then go ahead. Spend the night with him. Indulge in what you call love and intimacy, he said. I won't block your path, Frank interjected. I've already said this isn't about love. I don't love him. I love you, Frank. It's just physical. I'm attracted to Marc physically, not emotionally, Brooke insisted. So you're saying there's a difference between love and physical attraction? Frank asked. Yes, Frank. I'm spending time with Marc because of physical attraction. But I'll come back to you because of our love. You're my husband, my best friend, my soulmate. What we have is more than just physical, she reassured him. I won't argue about the difference between love and physical attraction with you, but as I've said, I won't stop you, Frank repeated. Brooke stared at Frank, wondering if he truly understood her. "If this is really what you want, go ahead." "But," Frank paused, "before you go, we're ending our marriage right now." Brooke panicked. "What do you mean?" "I mean that once you leave, our marriage is over. We'll take off our rings and get divorced. The formalities can come later," he said. Brooke wept bitterly. "Are you serious? If I spend just one night with Mark, you'll end our marriage?" "Absolutely," he confirmed seriously. Brooke transitioned from panic to anger as she realized her justification for spending the night with Mark was falling apart. "I won't agree to a situation where you sleep with Lelia and then we continue our lives as if it's nothing," he stated. "So my feelings and needs mean nothing to you," she remarked sarcastically. "Brooke, you were ready to leave without any explanation. If I hadn't stopped you, you'd be on your way to Mark's place now. Clearly, my feelings mean nothing to you." "Why should your feelings matter to me?" he questioned. The gravity of her choice struck Brooke. "Oh my goodness, Frank, I'm so sorry. I never thought about it," she said. "Damn it, Brooke, don't say you didn't think about it because you did. All I could think about was you getting ready for Lelia and the things he had planned for you," Frank began. "You certainly didn't consider my perspective." "Oh, God, Frank, please believe me. I never intended to leave without telling you where I was going. I planned to message you once I got to Mark's," she explained. "And message me? Really?" Frank laughed. "So while you're in bed with Lelia, you'd message me?" "Frank, I left the party to be with Mark, so I won't be home tonight. Good night and see you tomorrow." "Is that it?" Frank mocked. "This is heartless," she remarked. "Heartless, Brooke? It's heartless and unbelievable that you decided to leave me, your husband, your best friend, your soulmate, to spend the night with a man you just met," Frank said. Brooke sobbed. "What's truly heartless is your expectation for me to tolerate it as if it's insignificant. That's heartless," she protested. "I'm so sorry, Frank." "Sorry, I just didn't think," she said. "Well, Brooke, it doesn't matter now what you thought or didn't think, or what you said or didn't say, because I stopped you before you left. Now I understand your intentions, and you understand mine. We no longer need to guess. We must face the reality," Frank said firmly. Brooke looked at Frank with a questioning expression. "And what's the reality?" she asked. "The reality is this: there's the door, and Mark is waiting for you outside. I assume he's growing impatient." "The choice is yours," Frank said decisively. Without hesitation, Brooke declared, "Frank, I won't walk through that door. I refuse to leave you for him. I won't give up our life together for him." "I'm not that naive," Brooke explained to Frank. Frank observed her intently. "Just 15 minutes ago, you seemed ready to leave with him. What's changed? Or is it just that you don't want a divorce?" he asked. "Do you expect me to believe your desire for Mark has suddenly disappeared? Or are you planning to see him next week when I'm in Europe?" he continued. "No. Why would you think that?" Brooke exclaimed, raising her voice. "Are you planning to be unfaithful to me when I'm not around?" he pressed. "No, no, no, I have never been unfaithful to you. I would never betray you. I love you," she declared loudly. "But earlier tonight, you were about to be unfaithful. If I hadn't intervened, you'd be with him right now," Frank recounted. The truth hit Brooke hard, and she suddenly realized the gravity of her actions. "Oh my goodness, no, no, no. What was I thinking?" she yelled. "So what happened?" he inquired. "I'm not sure, Frank. I'm completely confused. I can't understand how I thought it was okay to go with Mark, thinking it wouldn't be wrong or hurt you," she admitted. Frank listened, but his doubtful look didn't escape her. She realized she needed to be completely honest with him. "Frank, I honestly don't know what got into me. It all started when Marc came up to our table asking me to dance and led me to the dance floor. He was so bold and insistent, constantly expressing his desire for me and how much fun it would be to be together romantically. Then he held me close, kissed me, and started to touch me. And Frank, I didn't resist, I didn't push him away, she confessed with tears running down her cheeks. So you encouraged him, Frank pointed out. Yes, I encouraged him. I'm deeply sorry, Frank, she sobbed. Then I convinced myself that leaving with him was the right choice and that you would understand and not mind if I went with him. I realize I've made a huge mistake, and I'm terribly sorry, she wept. Frank listened to Brooke and thought about the note the waiter had handed him. He reached into his pocket and presented it. Here. Read this, he suggested. Brooke read the note and then looked at Frank. Where did this come from? She inquired. The waiter handed it to me during our meal, he replied. Is this just a trick he uses? Brooke wondered. That's what it says here, Frank explained. Brooke was astonished after reading the note. I can't believe it, she remarked. He singled you out and enticed you. She washed her hands and face, seeing her reflection in the mirror, looking completely worn out, mirroring the chaos of the evening. Exiting the restroom, Brooke saw Frank waiting by the exit. She approached him quickly and embraced him. Oh, Frank, I'm profoundly sorry. Please forgive my foolishness and naivety, she pleaded. I promise we will never find ourselves in this situation again. Heading towards the exit, Frank noticed two of Marc's friends were still present. They observed him and Brooke. Brooke, I need to talk to Marc's friends, Frank declared. Please, let it go. We don't need any more complications, Brooke urged. No, Brooke, I can't just leave it like this. And with those words, Frank walked over, leaving Brooke alone. Approaching Marc's friends, Frank said, Gentlemen, we seek no trouble, one of them expressed. All right, then follow my instructions. Tell your friend Marc that he lost today, that he's a failure. Tell him that Frank Walker will make it known worldwide that Marc is a failure, Frank commanded. Both of Marc's friends stared at Frank, dumbfounded. Sir, we can't tell him that. He'd destroy us, one remarked. Do you prefer to deal with me or him? Frank inquired. Sir, we want no quarrel with you, one replied. Wise decision. Now, one of you call him and relay my message. Do it now, and tell him that after I leave, he should stay out of sight, Frank instructed. One of the men grabbed the phone, dialed Laval's number, and relayed Frank's message. Frank couldn't hear the conversation, but he sensed Laval's rage as the friend advised him to stay calm. What did he say? Frank asked. He said he would end you, one of the men responded. Okay, Frank acknowledged. Brooke, I promise you, I'll never let another man come near you, she said. Frank stared at her briefly, then responded, okay. And when we're out like tonight, I'll help you keep that promise. I should have stopped Laval before he got to you, but I didn't. So, it's both our fault, and Laval's. He shouldn't have pursued a married woman. I forgive you and myself, but not Laval. I'll deal with him eventually. Oh, Frank, thank you for understanding. But let's forget about Marc. We'll never see him again, and he's not worth the trouble, she stated. Frank wondered why she didn't want Marc to face any consequences, given that Laval almost ruined their marriage. I'll think about it, he assured her. Frank then asked, do you want to go back to the party? No, Frank, let's go home, Brooke exclaimed. Absolutely. Let's go home, Frank agreed. They walked back through the corridor, re-entered the restaurant, and left. Frank handed the valet ticket to get their car. While waiting, an SUV sped up and stopped abruptly in front of them. The passenger window rolled down, revealing an irate Marc Laval. Come on, Brooke, you said you wanted to be with me, so get in the car. Marc yelled. She won't go with you, Laval, Frank retorted. I'm not talking to you, old man, Marc yelled back. Come on, Brooke, let's go. No, Marc, I can't go with you tonight, Brooke replied. Brooke, get in the car now. Marc yelled again. She won't go with you. You lost. You're a loser. Now leave us alone, Frank said firmly. Being called a loser in front of the crowd enraged Marc. I'll show you who the real loser is, Marc yelled, getting out of his SUV. Frank warned the crowd to move away as the situation could escalate. He then walked to the front of the SUV, where he saw Marc holding a large semi-automatic pistol. Furious and humiliated, Marc was out of control. Frank, recalling a scene in Kenya where a lion defended its catch from hyenas, saw the same determination in Marc. Marc was fixated on taking Brooke, willing to do anything, even kill Frank. Brooke will come with me. If you try to stop me, I'll kill you, Marc declared. Frank stepped back, standing about 10 feet from Marc, his hands raised, palms forward, in a defensive but non-threatening stance. Put the gun down, Frank requested. You've disrupted my pursuit, and I'll end you. Put down the weapon before it escalates, Frank said in a calm, assertive tone. I'll show you who's in trouble. I'll end you and then go after your wife, Marc threatened, aiming the pistol at Frank. Absorbed in his rage, Lavalliere didn't notice Frank subtly moving his right hand into his pocket, where he had SIG Sauer micro-compact semi-automatic pistol loaded with 8 rounds of Hornady critical defense ammunition. Despite Lavalliere's outburst, Frank remained calm, regulated his breathing, and focused on his plan. He quickly drew his pistol, aimed at Lavalliere, and fired 2 precise shots. Suddenly, 3 quick shots rang out from behind Frank to his right. Lavalliere's body shuddered as the bullet struck him, and he fell to the ground. Startled by the unexpected gunfire, Frank wondered aloud, what the hell, and turned to see the shooter still aiming their gun at Marc's prone figure. Frank regained his composure and addressed the shooter. I think you've done it. You can lower your weapon, Frank said. He was going to kill you, the shooter replied. Yes, that's what he said, Frank responded, then asked, who are you? I'm an off-duty officer, and I'm in charge of security here, the shooter explained as they approached Lavalliere. Great. I'm glad you're here, Frank expressed. Me too, she replied. Frank and the security guard knelt beside Lavalliere, who was alive but groaning in pain from the 3 bullet wounds. What happened? Marc groaned. You were shot. Stay calm, Frank instructed. Who shot me? Marc asked. I did, Marc, the officer admitted. Marc stared at her. Marjorie, he uttered. Yes, Marc, she replied. Oh my gosh, Marjorie, why? Why did you shoot me? Marc asked, breathless. Because you were about to kill this man, Marjorie explained. Marc was panting heavily and bleeding profusely. Oh God, it hurts so much. Please help me. I've called an ambulance. They're on their way. Stay still and hang on, Marjorie instructed. Marc gasped for breath. I didn't mean to kill him. It was just a joke, he said, struggling to breathe. Pointing a gun and threatening someone is no joke, Marjorie retorted. Marjorie, you know it was a joke, he said weakly. Marc, how many times must I tell you that your joke could get you killed, she replied. I understand, but it was just a joke. I was just joking, he wheezed. Oh God, I'm so cold. Why am I so cold? Then he looked at Frank and pleaded, please, sir, I'm really thirsty. Could you get me some water? Frank turned and asked the bystanders to get water for Lavalliere. Marc was losing blood rapidly, and Frank realized that even if the paramedics arrived immediately, there was little chance of saving him due to the severe blood loss. Marc continued to plead for help, but then grew silent, weakened by the blood loss. After a few more moments, his breathing ceased. Frank checked for a heartbeat, but found none. Marc Lavalliere had passed away. It was past 11:30 p.m. when the authorities allowed Frank and Brooke to leave the restaurant and bar. They, along with other witnesses of the altercation and shooting, were interviewed by law enforcement detectives, special agents, internal affairs, and even an assistant prosecutor. Frank and Brooke recounted their interactions with Marc Lavalliere, and Frank publicly supported the off-duty officer's action to shoot Lavalliere, stating that she had saved his life. After a night that started with a birthday celebration and ended with being involved in the death of a local sports celebrity, Frank and Brooke were heading home. They traveled in silence for a while until Brooke finally spoke. "Frank," she began. "Yes," he replied. "Are you upset that you didn't kill him?" she asked without hesitation. "Yes," Frank admitted. Brooke considered his quick and clear answer, sensing his anger. Frank was frustrated and angry that the situation with Lavalliere ended with a female security officer shooting him. When Marc confronted them outside the restaurant, Brooke thought it was Frank Walker's challenge to handle, and she knew it wouldn't end well for Marc Lavalliere. Marc was young, arrogant, and had a gun, while Frank was a seasoned strategist. Frank was angry that Marc, acting childishly, tried to take his wife in front of him. Brooke knew Frank had a gun and had lured Marc into a situation where he might kill him, calling Marc a failure to provoke him. Marc took the bait, sealing his fate. Brooke felt guilty because she believed Marc's death was her fault. If Marc hadn't chosen her, and she hadn't agreed to go with him, he would still be alive. But an off-duty police officer shot Lavalliere, thinking she was protecting Frank, which prevented Frank from killing Marc and spared Brooke the pain of knowing her husband was the killer. "I'm glad you didn't kill him," she confessed. "Why?" Frank asked. "Because it's better that the officer did," she explained. "Do you mean because of the police and the media?" Frank pressed. "Yes, the press would have sensationalized it," she added. "It would have been a straightforward case of self-defense. He was aggressive, had a gun, and threatened my life. I would have had no choice but to defend myself," Frank explained. "Yes, but the press would question why you killed him instead of injuring him," she responded. "That's their job, but he was a lethal threat. For my safety, self-defense meant a decisive action," he countered. "Oh," she muttered, thinking over his words. "It will still be a media mess. Even though I didn't kill him, we'll face scrutiny," Frank shared. "And they'll blame me," she acknowledged. "Yes, they will. So be ready for that. Our lawyer will help, but the media will suggest his death is linked to us. We might face legal issues, but don't worry. We'll handle them. After all, he attacked us and threatened me, making us the victims," Frank explained. He reminded her, remember, he was a beloved football player and a local hero. In the media's eyes, he can do no wrong. Understand that for a while, all we will see in the press is the tragic story of poor Marc Lavalliere, portrayed as a victim of a jealous husband, leading to his death by a security officer. However, eventually, the true story of Marc Lavalliere will come out, and the media's frenzy will die down, losing interest in a sports icon known for seducing married women. "I wish for all of this to just go away," she said. "In time, it will," Frank assured her. They continued their drive in silence until Frank asked a provocative question about her potential regrets over missing a night of passion with Marc. Brooke, taken aback and offended, glanced at him in disbelief. After a brief pause, she firmly said, "No, absolutely not." This was the denial Frank expected. A simple "no" would have seemed genuine. However, the extended silence, her eyes, and her words revealed her true feelings. She was reflecting on the loss of her fantasy and trying to hide her disappointment from him. Yet, her gaze and tone betrayed her. Frank understood that the encounter had rekindled her sense of being more than just a wife, showing her she could seek pleasure outside her marriage. While they danced, Lavalliere talked about desires often left unspoken, even between spouses. His words sparked her curiosity. Lavaliere convinced her that the best way to explore these desires was with someone who had no emotional ties to her, someone experienced who could guide her. Thus, the groundwork for betrayal was laid, and Frank was aware of it. He realized she was now open to intimacy with other men, despite her earlier vow to refrain from such encounters. This was just a way to escape her current predicament. When Frank stopped her from leaving with Lavaliere, he noticed the change in her tone and behavior. Her actions showed a willingness to be with another man, though she wasn't ready to act on these impulses yet. But that was only for now. Frank knew he could never trust her again. As they drove home, he wondered if he could live with his distrust and accept that she might one day be with another man. Brooke would probably take that chance. This story is full of tension and unexpected twists, making us think about the consequences of our decisions. It hits with emotional depth and makes us reflect on the fine line between truth and lies, between our desires and moral principles.